Welcome to the Intrinsic First Leadership Podcast. I'm Aaron Robbins with Intrinsic First. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episodes. Ready to dive into the world of leadership? Let's get started. Welcome to the Intrinsic First Leadership Podcast. We have special guest today, Mr. Dave Hickey.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, Dave.
And so, we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff related to leadership. Dave is the CEO and founder of Alirrium, the people element. What is it calling the people element?
The human element.
Yeah, the human element. Yeah. Are you using that slogan?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
How big is it?
So we have 12 full-time, and then we have a bunch of offshore guys that work with us as well. So about double that.
Wow.
And we're actually starting to hit a real growth spurt. So we're hoping to like double in the next year or two.
You mean in size of FTEs?
Yeah.
Well, how about revenue generation?
So we're targeting about $7 million this year.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Yeah. So we actually started the company during COVID. 6 months before COVID hit. So if you talk about starting any company, it's a difficult task doing it right before a global pandemic when the world shuts down.
That wasn't in the business plan, was it?
No. You talk about leadership challenges. There was a bunch of gut checks in that. But I mean, you guys are starting up a small business here too. So the ups and downs of having a small business. Now, you guys kind of did it. I mean, you launched right away with a contract, which was really nice, kind of stabilized.
About a year in, maybe, I guess.
Yeah, and we bootstrapped, so we had full-time jobs. We didn't.
Yeah.
You went.
No, yeah. So we bootstrapped as well, but we were all in. Like so we had at one point we had 7 people who started up the company with me, and nobody was getting a salary until we started winning work.
Right.
Which is that's the gut check when COVID hit, right? Because we had a whole ton of contracts that were lined up and ready to go, and COVID slowed things down considerably. So if
it weren't for that, I might have been over. We might not be here right now. I'd have been. We'd have been doing Alirrium.
So I guess just background on what Alirrium is, real quick too, for you guys. So we're a robotic process automation company, RPA. It's considered the fastest growing technology in history up until probably ChatGPT coming out and the whole AI thing really taking off. But I was actually introduced to the technology at my previous firm, and we were trying to figure out how to build or how to develop some differentiators for the company because we were graduating, and came across this technology, and I was like, all right, well, this is an interesting application because it has this low code aspect of it that makes it easy for people who are non-developers to actually build these automations. And so we partnered with, after we kind of did an initial analysis of the market and all the vendors that were out there, we partnered with a company called UiPath, who was becoming the market leader at the time, right? They were really coming on very strong about 7 or 8 years ago. And we started using the technology internally at the company, just doing some test cases and pilots of the application. And it was actually pretty impressive. And, so when I decided to start my own company, I was thinking, all right, well, we got this fast growing technology. And they're looking for partnerships. It was actually kind of interesting just because I kind of let my network know. I was thinking about starting up this RPA company, but that I was kind of burnt out by federal contracting because I'd done it for 16 years.
Know the feeling.
Yeah. And I just wanted to do something new. And so right around that time, one of my friends in my network called me up, and he's like, hey, Dave, I was at this family cookout, and my brother-in-law was there, and he's had the same job for the last 16 years or 20 years. And so I just asked him how the job's going. He goes, oh, actually changed firms. he goes, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, I'm the commercial sales rep for UiPath for Virginia,
fantastic.
Maryland, DC." And he goes, "Oh my gosh, I have a friend that wants to do UiPath in the commercial market. Would you like to meet him?" And so next thing we know, we're meeting Ivan, and Ivan kind of lays it all out. Hey, this is growing really fast, and one of our issues is we don't have a lot of implementation partners. And so if you sign on with us, I'll help you like learn how to pitch the technology, and and UiPath, it was fantastic from that standpoint. They're really great from a partnership, training, certification processes, and all that stuff.
What was a demo that you saw that got your attention the first time?
So I went to a conference, and they started showing the application being used at various clients. It was a federally based focused conference, but it was pretty impressive. And I actually remembered during that conference, I turned to this woman who was sitting next to me, and I think she worked for a smaller accounting firm. And I just looked at her and I said, "Hey, do you think this is real?" Because it sounded too good to be true, right? Matter of fact, they did make it sound like you could hand an iPad to a 2-year-old and they could build a robot. It's not that easy. It's not quite that easy, right? Yeah. But it's the low code aspect of it is pretty extraordinary. You can, if you have somebody who really knows what they're doing, they can build these robots rather quickly, these digital workers. But I asked her, "Do you think it's real?" And she's like, "Oh no, we've been deploying this thing for about a year now, and it's legitimate." So
for our viewers, like what exactly is it? Like a spreadsheet that the robot's going in there and just doing mundane tasks?
Yeah. So literally, so these digital workers can simulate anything a human does on a computer. So it's opening up an application, it's logging into a website, it's transferring the data back and forth, right? It's literally
like super fast too.
Super fast, yeah. Right? And so when we sit down with customers and we help them figure out what the use cases are, right? For this technology to be used. But when we sit down with them, we just basically tell them, "Show us your job, like record it." And they sit there and record their screen and they show us, "Hey, then I open this application and I type in this stuff and then I open this spreadsheet," and whatever it is. And then we can build the robot to simulate all of those actions, right? So anything that's high volume, rules-based.
So as long as it's repeatable.
Right. You can build in exception management into it. Matter of fact, that's where, it's getting into the AI aspect of things now too. So when we first started the company 5 years ago, it was really, rather simple processes, rules-based, high volume, and it's stable, you're not changing out the applications, right? But now that AI is becoming more and more involved, they're integrating the AI into the robots, right? So the robots were very simple and like they do what you tell it to do, exactly, right? Yeah. Now we have this ability to make decisions feeding into the robot and the arguments getting passed back and forth, right? So one of the most common automations we do like all the time is we do accounts payable processing for companies, right? And so we have companies that get thousands and thousands of invoices, right? So we have one customer that gets invoices in 15 different languages, right? And these invoices come in and first the robot is monitoring an email account, right? Because people usually have a common email account where all their invoices come in, but it triages those. And if it finds an invoice, it sends it to a machine learning engine that takes the invoice, extracts all the data. And if like invoices are all different, right? So it's semi-structured. So it has the same basic information, but it's different wording or the different formats, right? So the machine learning engine's smart enough to intelligently extract all the data despite the language and despite the format, right? And, once it extracts it, it normalizes it, gets it into a structured format. And then the bot takes that and then will log into your ERP application and start uploading all the data for you instead of a human doing it. And then it'll kick off workflows, right? So it'll take that information after it gets the voucher and it'll send it off to whatever folks they need to start managing the process and approving. And it's all based on their business rules. Sometimes things get auto processed. Sometimes they go off to, depending on dollar thresholds. Right.
And this happens like in a matter of seconds.
Oh, very quick. Yeah.
It's
astounding.
So right about this time.
It's as fast as the lag of
course.
the system.
Yeah,
that
you
we're
actually
using.
have to
Right,
slow
yeah.
down the computer
Right.
sometimes.
Right.
You have to slow down the robot rather.
No, I just think we have an employee that works for us, and he's working in the program office, and he's using Python to basically screen scrape PDF invoices.
Yeah, it's the same
Yeah,
thing.
it's the same.
But he's doing it himself. Like he's
Yeah. So the problem is there's
real.
so these robots are centrally managed, controlled. We can do things like, if we have one customer that runs 190 automations every month, and some are daily, some are weekly, some are monthly automations. And if you had all these one-off Python scripts, like how do you manage it all, right? So
That's what UiPath does.
the UiPath helps you manage all of that. So it's tracking all of the automations and understands the utilization of the robots, right? And so if you had a process that you knew had to end at 3:00 in the morning in order to, prep data for another process that is downstream, and you got hit with a high volume transaction level that day, UiPath, everything would get queued up in their orchestrator tool, which is sort of the brains behind the whole operation for UiPath. They centrally orchestrate everything and then push the signals down to the robots to execute the different automations. But they can swarm a process, right? So if it had a high volume hit their queue, the orchestration tool would look at that and say, "Oh, I have 5 idle robots. I'm going to throw all 5 of those robots at the process."
I had no idea it was that intricate. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. I mean, it's astounding how much productivity you can get out of these robots. It is. I mean, they are fast. They don't make mistakes. We generally tell people there's about 10 times faster than a human, right? But there's no distractions here. It just runs and goes 24/7.
What's this technology called again?
UiPath is
RPA.
it's called robotic process automation, right? And it's gonna, it's merging with AI. So as soon as I think they're just going to rename it intelligent automation. But UiPath is the partner that we implement. There's several different vendors out there. There's like any segment. There's a lot of different customers, and some are very targeted towards certain types of markets. But UiPath is generally considered sort of the market leader when you look at all the Forrester and Gartner and
And a lot of the challenges in the beginning was just educating your customer base, like what RPA is.
Oh,
and what
yeah.
it can do for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny when we look at our old presentations, right? Like some of our first slides were like, this isn't an actual physical robot. Like people were thought like this thing's walking in the room.
Click,
Right?
type.
Right? So yeah, there was a lot of that education up front. And now it's, a lot of people are much smarter on this. And they're, hey, I used to work at this company, and they're telling each other. And so the conversations are getting a lot shorter from that perspective. But
Attrition works in your favor.
yeah, actually. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You can kind of point to different customers, and, they all know each other, or they used to work there, and hey, I heard my buddy tells me, we're doing this over here. So yeah, but
So do you want to talk about SalesFed a little bit too?
yeah, actually, so one of the first robots we built was for a big federal contractor, and it was actually kind of humorous because we walked in and they're like, typically this is when we start with a customer, it's typically in the finance department, right? Because rules-based, high volume, right? They got lots of that.
That's perfect
right?
for it, yeah.
It's perfect for it, right? So everybody wants it in the finance and accounting departments. In this case, somebody from their sales group actually said, hey, can we take a look at this? And so we sat down with them initially, and we just, kind of went through RPA 101. What's the technology? When do you use it? What are the use cases, or what are the what are the attributes of RPA that you should consider for your business processes, right? And so we came up with a list of 10 different things that they could potentially use if they wanted to pilot something. And number 10 on the list was take federal RFPs and create compliance matrices, right? It was pretty hard. And I used to do sales for my last firm. I was, I think I was in the sales group for about 8 years, right? So I'm very familiar with the process and how you respond to federal.
And that was number 10 on the list.
Yeah, like I didn't want them to do this.
Right.
Like, this is really hard, right? And I knew their budget was limited. So, but we were in the stage where like the qual, is more important than it being profitable and everything. So, in any event, so they said, hey, this is what we want to do. And so initially I'm like, okay, rules-based, standardized. So I'm like, okay, so we can do this. Like, give me one of your customers that always has the same format of RFP, right? And, since it's standardized, I can intelligently extract all the different parts of the RFP.
It's a compliance section, right? The compliance portion of the RFP.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the compliance is all throughout the RFP, right? So there's different sections of the RFP you got to extract it for, and they marry up a little bit differently. You have your instructions, then you have your evaluation criteria, then you have your statement of work, right? And you have to map them all together.
Harm any human beings
in this process, right?
Yeah. So we kind of went to them and said, all right, well, give us one of your biggest customers that has a standard form, and then we can just extract it and scrape all that information for you. And they're like, no, we want to do this for any format. I was like, oh my gosh, right? So we developed a process where we had customers tag the RFP. So we built this Excel spreadsheet that identified all the different potential sections of the RFP. And they actually had to open up the RFP and they'd copy and paste where they wanted the bot to start scraping information and where you wanted it to stop. And they would put it in the spreadsheet, right? So here's the evaluation criteria, start scraping here, stop scraping here, and here's the document it's coming in from. And so they'd fill out this form, and it would take, 20, 30 minutes to fill out the form. And then they would email it to a robot, and the robot would get the form, and it would open up all the documents and start scraping everything together, right? And then we built this very elaborate Excel spreadsheet that allowed them to map everything together, right? And there were scorecards, and it was pretty slick. And we went through 42 iterations of this Excel spreadsheet over several years, and we actually resold this several different times. People were like, "Oh, this is really cool," because we're getting away from all the copying and pasting, right? And then we kind of built them a tool that helped them map everything together.
And the benefits, other than time for people that typically write these proposals, it was just. What were some of those benefits, I guess, that they were?
It was time, right? So the RFPs, you have a very, it's 30 days to respond, or sometimes it's task orders, you have 14 days to respond. So time is critical, right? And this compliance matrix, you had to be done at the very beginning of the process, right? So typically within 48 to 72 hours of the RFP hitting, you had to have the kickoff meeting, which means you had to have your compliance matrix laid out, which all the requirements married up against your proposal outline. That's the matrix, right? That's all the data gets lined up that way. And so you had to have that done, and it had to be solid. And then typically what they did with that as well, once you have the compliance matrix, because you have your outline and you have all the requirements against it, you would hand it off to somebody who would take all that information from the matrix and put it into a Word document with your branded, template that you'd hand out to your proposal writers, so they knew what they were writing to, right? So you own sections 1.0 through 1.8. Here are all the requirements, the instructions, start writing, right? And so you'd hand that all out. And all that had to be done in 72 hours. And so it was speed. It was faster to do it this way, but it was also quality. So the quality was better. And actually one of our customers told us, it was great. He goes, Dave, you only get a first shot at your first proposal draft. And if your compliance matrix is wrong, you never recover, right? So it's a critical process for them. So anyways, we built this tool out. We sold it to several different customers. They liked it. It was very hard to maintain. It was a little difficult to use. The copying and pasting from documents into an Excel spreadsheet formats changed and everything. And sometimes the bot wouldn't find it. So you'd email it, the bot would shoot it back. I couldn't find it. Can you try again and do something? And we'd have to train them on how to do it right. So there was zealots at the companies that just figured it out and they knew how to do it. And so they always used the bot and they liked it. But some of the other folks were like, it's too hard, right? Like I'd send it over, it wouldn't come back. I'm like, forget it. I'm just going to build it myself anyways. So the customers, they would come up to me and they'd say, hey, we like the tool. We're going to renew the tool. It's all good. But just to let you know, our whole goal is to standardize across our entire company, right? Because anytime you have deviations in a process, you have errors and things slow down, right? And this is about compliance, right? So
yes, they had a bigger picture in mind for that.
Yeah. They're just like, hey, listen, like if we're going to do this, we're going to pay for this. We want to have everybody use the tool. So they just kind of let me know, hey, we're always going to be on the market, right, for this, for a tool that's can be universally deployed. And so it was right around that time I had a good friend of mine, Thad Shear, who owns managing partners and leads a company called Sphere OI. They're an AI engineering firm, right? So they've been around for about 23 years, and I'd known him for several years at the time, and he told me about all the like legitimate AI applications they'd been building for their customers, and some of them were just astounding. Like it's amazing some of the stuff they've been building.
I love the fact that you just said it's AI, which we all
think we know
for about maybe a year now.
Yeah,
but he's been in business for 23
years.
That I think is a super important part.
It's been around a long
point
time.
to make because it's been around a long time, but it's just now coming mainstream.
Well, it's just now becoming to the point where people can use it effectively enough that it hit a tipping point.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it was just absurdly expensive, and the development for the.
That would tell you it's still pretty expensive to do. I think Chat just made it an application that any user could use, and then get to see what AI can actually do. It is rather impressive, right? Yeah. The language models that are out there,
and you could even argue it's still in its infancy as far as making it,
Dude, I think we're only scratching the surface on what this thing's gonna.
Well,
10, 20 years from now.
Discussion around that. I'm happy to go down that pathway.
We don't need to go down that path.
No, I'm happy to go because it's fascinating when you start to think about the speed of technology and change and the impact that it's having on society and the unease I think we all feel.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Right?
No, 100%.
Self-driving cars also scare me.
Well, I'd still like to talk to you about some of that, David, because do you remember what both these guys introduced me to Chat?
Yeah.
And
Drea and I have spent many hours playing around trying to look himself up and understand what it has to say about
it's not that.
SL
It's the theory. It's the theory. Because what I said to him was, the question I asked Chat was, had situational leadership ever been proven to work?
So here's what I've learned recently, and a lot from some of the stuff that Thad was just talking about when we did the webinar, is that ChatGPT is made, or all the large language models are made with what they call hallucinations.
Yeah, they always hallucinate.
Which is
trying to control.
Right. So it's essentially, it's predicting. It's guessing. Mm-hmm. So it's not made to take data and just try to report on it.
It can't do it. That's right.
It's at least right now. It will, I think, and it's already getting better. But it's really made, those hallucinations are made for creativity. So if you wanted to say, how could we make situational leadership a better model? It could probably come up with all kinds of crazy ideas with the hallucinations. That would be interesting. Yeah. But if you're just trying to say, tell me about the research that Ken Blanchard and Paul Hersey did on situational leadership.
Yeah, that's a historical search, actually. What you're looking for.
It'll give you something.
Well, that's the problem. Yeah. When I've tried, papers for lit reviews, I've said, hey, give me 5 articles or journal articles on, feedback. And it'll give me 5 articles with titles and authors that all sound real, with journals that are real. And if you look up the issue and the journal number, it's the right issue to the right journal, but the article name and authors are made up. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because they can't afford to.
No, it's hallucination. It made it up.
The purpose is creativity, right? It's not to.
Wow.
So that's part of the challenge. So I guess back to the Thad story. I showed Thad the tool, right? And he looked at it, and this was over 2 years ago. He looked at it. He goes, that spreadsheet with the outline, with your proposal outline and all the requirements. He goes, if you gave that to me, he goes, I'd write you a first draft of your proposal.
Yeah, the whole
Now,
shebang.
now
yeah.
we're
Now.
getting somewhere.
right? So this was before chat.
Sure,
So you all
yeah.
know now what chat does, right?
Right.
I had never seen anything like that. So I looked at him. I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? Right? Like I had no idea.
Holy
right?
mackerel.
So there you go. That's exactly what I was.
Thad said that to me, and I was like, "What?" There's a sound effect for you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it.
I got a few more. We'll see if it comes up.
But he's like, we're going to have to improve on that interface, right? Because it's clunky. And so we kind of hatched this plan that became something called SalesFed, right? So that would essentially mimic what we did in the Excel spreadsheets, right? Because we'd gone through, I almost say we had like 3.5 years of R&D working with clients and refining the tool and how they wanted to use it. And they really liked our approach. And they liked their ability because it kind of controlled the whole situation. It wasn't giving them the answer. It was just making the manual process much more efficient for them, right? And so we built, our whole plan was, okay, launch, the old Excel version, the bot version, we called the sales support bot, right? And so the whole plan was to launch version 1, which would replace the sales support bot with what became something called SalesFed. And then go to market, right? And because there's a lot of value there, right? But to follow that up with, an AI engine, an error-gapped AI engine that would sit on the client's network, right? And ingest all of their, past performances and past proposals and white papers and marketing materials.
Lots of proprietary information. So
yeah, exactly. Which was why it would have to be air-gapped on their networks, right? Yep. So it would understand exactly what it meant to be company Y, right? And then it would look at all the information for that specific bid, right? So basic information from the company, generic, right? On how their methodologies, approaches, past performances. And then you had the actual RFP, right, with all the requirements, and then all the capture data that your sales team has been working on for the last year on how you're going to approach this, what your
win themes,
proof points, features, and benefits that you're bringing,
ghosts,
right? And so essentially, this engine would take all that information and build a response, right? And taking into account, Thad showed me the architecture that they built out. There's like 5 different AI engines to do this. It's not one, right? A language model is just one of them they're using. And by the way, there's hundreds of language models.
It's crazy. When Thad pulled that website up, I had no idea.
There's
literally
everything is
of
chat,
language models.
So there's all of these
in different languages.
No.
So
language.
computer
ChatGPT is one software program.
Oh yeah.
There's hundreds of them, and they're open source. Wow. ChatGPT is an open source, but
some of them are, some aren't.
A lot of them are.
So, and they all have different contractual, some you can use commercially, some you can't. Some are just academics.
Right.
So you have to figure out and some of them they have strengths and weaknesses, right? Some are long form content, but it's not quite as good. Some of it's just, all you can get is a paragraph and that's it. They have all these restrictions on it. So in any event, Thad showed me the architecture about all these different AI engines that would have to run, extracting and building its own
build
prompts.
Out this first draft, right?
And then
you have multiple bots essentially, right? One bot's reviewing another bot's stuff.
Yeah. So the AI engines are bots, right? And so it would go through, and there was a prompt engine, the quality of the prompts, and then generating the data and then evaluating the data, grading the data, and then one that was just making sure it wasn't hallucinating.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I ask a technical question in my mind? Could you have a bot that would go through an article, a academic article, and be able to tell us or spit back what instruments were used to measure whatever theory was used?
You can now with ChatGPT.
Can you do that now?
Could do that. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, just within the last 6 months, you've been able to now upload documents into ChatGPT. I'm sure that could have created something years ago that could have done that, but
it was actually interesting, right? So we hatched this plan years ago and had been working on SalesFed 1.0, and it took a while to get that out, right? And then chat came out, right? And I called that. And I'm like, uh-oh, we too late? Like,
You were past it.
But you said no, right?
Yeah, no. He goes, no, Dave. He goes, this is what's going to happen. He goes, there's a bunch of people who are seeing this for the first time. They're going to look at this and they're going to be like, oh, I can write a proposal with this. And they're going to do something simple and a prompt wrapped around a language model, air gap it, and sell it to clients. And he goes, and it's going to suck, right? He goes, the answers are going to be awful. And so I think he gave me a stats, 84% of AI projects fail between prototype and production. It's in the 80s, yeah. And he's like, it's really easy. It's really easy to build a prototype of an AI engine that will impress people. He goes, it's really hard to build a production tool that is actually worthwhile. It kind of reminded me of Elon Musk when he goes, it was really easy to build a prototype car, right? Like when he rolled out the Cybertruck, because that was easy. Like,
dude, we saw one of those on the highway going up to Vegas. It looks really ridiculous. Cool. Yeah.
I mean, he goes, making a production car is the hard part. Like, it's infinitely more difficult than. So, he looked at it. He goes, Dave. He goes, don't worry. There's a lot of they're going to be coming out of the woodwork. Don't worry about it. Like, we have our strategy, and it's ours. We have a very different approach, right? So it's whereas they'll just do prompts, right? We're basing ours on compliance out of the gate, right? So we have capture data, we have compliance data. We have a company who's been building and fielding AI tools for 23 years, right?
That's over 2 decades.
Yeah. Well, like I look at you look at like Apple. They were not the first in the market for iPods. They weren't the first in the market for iPhones.
They were always big on control and quality and they had a different approach. And so there are a bunch of companies that did come out and have been doing, So how big was your team going through this? It wasn't just you and that, right? Did you have like a team?
Yeah. So I think we had probably at one point we had about 8 developers that were in there working on different aspects of it, and we're still developing out the AI part of it. It's as Thad says, it's hard science. This is not an easy thing to solve, right?
But it sounds exciting. And I can imagine if you're one of those 8 in the thick of it and knowing the possibilities and just can't wait to debut like your product to everyone. That's pretty
well. The
intense.
SalesFed first generation is selling pretty well, actually. It's people really like it.
How did you feel when you first got that first draft out? Like, you built this
tool and the first customers. I mean, it was. Well, it was interesting because I mean, we built it in the old version, right, with Excel, and so we knew there was a market already, which is great, right? And then we started showing the second generation, the SalesFed application, while in R&D with our existing clients. And they were pretty excited because it was slick. I mean, they did a fantastic job making it incredibly easy to use. That's kind of its superpower. It's pretty intuitive, especially compared to the previous tool, right? And that's the feedback we get all the time. It's like, it's pretty easy to use this thing. And so, we started to deploy it. We were getting good feedback from our clients when we were first building out the tool. Several of our clients actually gave us testers during the development phase, which is gold, right? Like, how do you do user acceptance testing with real users who really know what they're doing, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. So they gave me testers, and they gave us. I mean, man, we had a hit list of items we needed to fix to improve on it, but it was. Great. It was fantastic. It was amazing feedback. Yeah. And some of those recommendations made it, and some of them I hadn't even thought of on how you would improve the application to make it a lot stronger application.
Yeah, it helps have those early adopters and they're helping you build the product. That's always a win-win, I think.
Yeah. So it's pretty exciting, but I guess going back to the general AI topic, and I definitely think there's a general sense of unease amongst everybody, right? One story I tell a lot when I talk to customers, probably, must have been 7 years ago, I read a book by Thomas Friedman called Thank You for Being Late.
It's in that somewhere.
Yeah. I think I recommended it to all you guys.
Yeah, I read it. It was long.
Yeah, it was long. It was a good book though, and it was about the impact of technology on society in general, and the speed of technology and change. Right, and during, I think one of the chapters, he talks to a gentleman named Astro Teller from Google. He runs their R&D company, which I think they shot off. But the topic was technology and the speed of technology, right? And so during the book, there was a nice graph in the book where Astro says, well, everybody's familiar with the technology curve, right? It's like a hockey stick, right? And, he kind of, where the curve just starts to go up, he puts a little X in there and he goes, this is kind of where we're at now, right? The speed is
it's going to take
the
off.
Change, right? I think it was 1903 to 1966 was between the Wright brothers and landing on the moon.
Is that right?
Yeah. 66 years,
word.
right?
66
yeah.
years.
And so that just gives you perspective, like, 66 years. And we went from a guy that flew for 22 seconds, I can't remember how long it was,
right.
To landing on the moon, right? And he goes, and we're starting to go up the curve, right? He goes, but there's another line on this graph that nobody talks about. And that other line is humans' ability to adapt to the technology, right? And he goes, it's always been above, right? We've always been, we've been able to adapt from a typewriter to an electric typewriter to a word processor to a computer, right? Some people...
To a phone.
Right? So people have been able to adapt to it.
An iPod to an iPhone.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be the case going forward.
Well, no,
we've already passed it.
Yeah, he's already passed it. Yeah. He said sometime in like 2007 or something like that.
What passed? You mean the machine went past
the lines, the technology curve and the adaptable curve.
So humans' ability to handle the change, technology is now moving faster than we can handle that.
And he gave some examples, like people go to school for 6 years to get a skill and then come out and
obsolete.
It's obsolete, right?
Like, well, I mean, you saw the digital divide, that whole conversation when the internet came about, and who was getting left behind and who wasn't. But now you advance forward to AI and what's coming forward. I mean, it's just gonna, that digital divide might just get greater and greater.
Right.
Technology.
Well, it's interesting because he asked Astro, he's like, what do companies do? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the amount of disruption that's going to occur over the next 10, 20 years is nobody can, his point is nobody can predict it.
Right.
Right. Technology is moving so fast that we can no longer adapt or predict where it's all going.
Yeah. You talk about really what job you want to get after you get out of college. We're like, I don't know. It hasn't been created yet.
Potentially. Yeah. Well, one of the things I thought was actually pretty interesting and is relevant for you guys is, he's like, well, what do companies do? And his recommendation is like build an adaptable company, right? So it's culture. Yeah. Like, how do you, as a leader, instill throughout your entire organization the ability to adjust and adapt so that you can move quickly?
Imagine if you built a model, which a lot of consulting firms do, and then by the time you get to try to test that, it's probably outdated.
Potentially, yeah. Or you choose a technology to invest in, and you train all your people in it, and then something way better comes out, and you just sunk all of this investment into an approach that is no longer.
So from a leadership perspective, you've got leaders are going to have to be able to work with and handle all this technology, right? Some of their employees are going to essentially be bots. But at the same time, the technology is going to allow them to do more creative and advanced kind of things because they're going to have more time. They're going to be out of the mundane.
Well, yeah. And that actually leads to RPAs. So going back away from SalesFed back to robotic process automation. So I kind of look at it as helping organizations realign work, right? So getting your people out of the low level stuff.
Yeah, so that's
the mundane stuff that they hate doing, and they're not, necessarily even particularly good at data transfer.
I have a comment on that. Were we?
Oh, there's a lot. Yeah, that if we interface some of the things that you've been talking about, in relation to the things that I think are problematic in human relations or human interactions, and of trying to get people to change their behavior in a way that will enable them to be more effective. There's a crap load of stuff underneath there that it has to be considered in order for you to do it. So one of the things David would talk about is people understanding the disposition of somebody else, which is an unconscious tendency to do something, whether an extrovert or an extrovert. Imagine if you could link that to disposition, values, persona, life experiences. All of a sudden, there would be a greater sense of, I could do this, or this person could be convinced to do X or Y as part of their own development. It would be astounding.
Well, that's where, like, as much as the technology is kind of separating us and we're all kind of in our own world, thinking in our own bubbles and sound chambers and whatever, I think that there's this balance that's going to happen. As much as the technology comes in, it's also going to make it that much more important that we're able to work with each other, because we're going to have that more time to do those complex creative things. And that's where all these leadership things that we've been talking about, the understanding disposition, understanding values, and
you got it.
Developing values, which I think, and we've talked a lot about that, is so critical, that I think is a huge gap right now, is people don't understand themselves. They don't know their own values, and they're not practicing living their values.
They're stuck. We call it stuck in the digital assembly line, right? They're just moving data around all day, right? I was hired to be a data analyst. Went through all these, courses on how to analyze data and manipulate it and help make decisions. And then my job is, how do I just get the data in front of me for 7 hours and 30 minutes, and then I have a half an hour to do the actual job that I was, right? Like, what if you showed up in the morning and the bot did all of that for you, and the data is just sitting there ready for you to start taking action on and doing the things that are intrinsically human, right?
I think you went by what I heard you say. Let's see if I can paraphrase it.
Are you active listening to me?
Drea. He's going to do this. I can see it. I'm going to get him.
Let's get him, Drea.
Yeah. What I thought he was saying was that people don't have psychological skills. They don't have skills. They don't even understand what makes them who they are and how that works for them and what could be done to open that up. Like I was talking to Jimmy this morning where I had a job. Someone said, I've got a manager, and can you coach this person? I want to fix him. That's the way that this guy was talking.
Did you get some duct tape?
But the point I wanted to make was that when I got into the assignment, the guy knew who he was and was continuing to be terribly dysfunctional to his boss, to his direct reports, and to the peers that he was working with.
Are you saying we're going to give people more time to be dysfunctional?
Well, what I'd like to have happen is for people to understand that they are first, number one, dysfunctional to what they're being asked and expected to do, but more importantly, that there's a recognition of what you could do differently. Because oftentimes people don't change the behavior because they don't have anything to put in there that makes sense or less troublesome to everybody else. So how can we help, given the technologies that you've described up to this point, people be more effective with themselves?
Right. So I had a sort of the vision of Alirrium was to help companies, right, first deploy the digital workforce, right, and free up as many people's time, right, recaptured productivity, what you call it, right?
But don't get rid of them.
No,
that's where you and I were talking.
We're not seeing. I mean, and by the way, I mean, there's labor shortages. I think we're losing 30,000 baby boomers are retiring every month. We're net losing.
Finally.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
He's one bad podcast from never coming back, by the way.
But that's a key point. This technology is not replacing the workforce.
I mean, it certainly can, but
it's changing it, though.
It's changing it.
It's changing it is what we're saying. I mean, it certainly could, there are instances, but for the most part, and in the future, by the way, in the United States with the baby boomers all retiring, there's going to be, it's going to be hard to find people.
Yeah, Gen X is not able to match all the number of jobs that the baby boomers are carrying.
Oh, yeah.
Heyday.
Yeah.
We're probably ready for a good joke or two.
So, Jimmy, you want to tell your...
All right, I'm just going to let somebody else go first.
Oh, this is a joke hour?
So, you call 2 people having sex a twosome, right? Then you call 3 people having sex a threesome.
Do it to Drea.
Is that why they call you handsome?
That's not good. You put it him.
Aaron's like, don't do it to me. Do it to Drea.
That's really, really good. I like it a lot.
Congrats! You made it to the end of the episode. Thanks for tuning in. We genuinely hope that you found value in our conversation. If you liked it, please click that like button below and subscribe so that you can stay up to date on our current episodes. And if you didn't like it, you can click the dislike button, but make sure you click it twice. We're eager to hear from you, whether it's your thoughts, questions, topic ideas, or if you're interested in our leadership training and consulting support. Leave us a comment below or reach out to us directly at info@intrinsicfirst.com. We're open to any and all feedback. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to having you back for more insightful leadership discussion. Until next time.